Throughout the history of science, for every revolutionary breakthrough, there have been almost as many frauds, perpetrated by those seeking to profit from the world's thirst for knowledge and discovery. Some of these hoaxes are familiar, but there are lesser-known scams that have had an enormous impact on how we understand the world around us. In 1725, in the small university town of Würzburg, lived Dr. Johann Bartholomäus Adam Beringer. Beringer was a very proud and learned man, a professor of medicine, chemistry and botany. He was the Dean of Medical Sciences at the University of Würzburg, where his colleagues knew him as an arrogant and vain man, with little regard for the opinion of others. Beringer was also the private physician of the Prince Bishop of Würzburg, the very powerful ecclesiastic leader, and his patronage allowed Beringer to indulge some of his other scientific and theological interests. Principal amongst these was a passion for the collection and classification of fossils. While lithology, as it was then known, was not his main area of expertise, Beringer had a special personal interest in the study of how these stones were formed. At the time there were several competing theories. The first of these was the spermatic principle, which goes a bit like this. The products of the consummation of love between two fish would escape into the sea and from there evaporate into the atmosphere to ultimately fall as rain. The rain would drip into the cracks and crevices in the ground, whereupon a brand new fish would grow right there inside a rock. Another theory of the day proposed that light from the sun was in fact a flow of minute solar bodies that could remember the forms of everything it shone upon. Those images would be stored as a sort of photo memory that could be impressed upon any surface the sun's rays later touched. The signature of God was another popular theory, and the one Beringer himself profoundly believed in. He was convinced that such stones, like the very stars in the heavens, were evidence of the majesty of God the Creator. Indeed, Beringer, like many others of the time, believed that God himself would carve out each animal or plant in the rocks with his own divine hammer and chisel. However, Beringer was rather averse to the idea of digging in muddy fields himself in order to pursue his interests in lithology. Now, he preferred to hire a couple of locals to do the dirty work for him. Beringer favoured a certain spot on a hillside above the town, and it was to this spot that he dispatched two boys, Nikolaus and Valentin, on one fateful occasion. When the boys returned and presented the find to Beringer, he was astonished. These figured stones, or iconoliths, were unlike anything ever seen before. The stones depicted icons of plants, reptiles, fish, animals, in the most amazing combinations. Spiders sitting on their webs, birds with clutches of eggs, frogs mating, all caught suspended in time. The boys were swiftly sent off again to find more. Indeed, between June and November of 1725, Beringer amassed a collection of over 2,000 iconoliths. As more stones were found, they became even more fantastic. Birds with the heads of fish, little mermaid-like creatures, even suns, moons and stars. Some stones had Latin and Hebrew characters spelling out the name of God. Here at last was the evidence Beringer had been searching and praying for. Evidence of the handiwork of a divine creator. Beringer set to work writing a book revealing his extraordinary find to the world, and its profound religious implications, thus ensuring his own place in history. No expense would be spared. He commissioned a famous artist to make engravings of the stones. The result was his treatise, Lithographiae Virkeburgensis. On the eve of the book's publication, two of Beringer's rival colleagues from the university, Georg von Eckardt and Ignaz Roderick, paid him a visit, despite the fact that they had a rather strained professional relationship. They urged him to reconsider his decision to make public so soon his grandiose claims. Could there not be another explanation? Was it not possible that somebody had tried to trick him with stones they had carved themselves? Beringer dismissed their misgivings out of hand, putting it down to a bad case of professional jealousy. Beringer published his book, even adding an extra chapter denouncing what he saw as jealous rivalry and discrediting his critics' theories on the origins of his stones. If Beringer had entertained any doubts, he had put them aside in favour of seeking celebrity and critical acclaim. Not long after, however, he was confronted with a rather uncomfortable truth that heralded a very public humiliation. At a banquet hosted by Beringer's patron, the Prince Bishop of Würzburg, the stone's authenticity was dramatically called into question. Beringer's rival, Ignaz Roderick, carved out an iconolith just like Beringer's famous stones, right there in front of him. He could deny it no longer. He had been the victim of an elaborate hoax. In the spring of 1726, Beringer retaliated by initiating judicial proceedings against Roderick and Eckardt in order to save his tattered reputation. In the surviving court transcripts, the hoaxers offered little by way of a defence, except that Beringer is deeply arrogant and he despises us all. Such was the depth of their dislike for Beringer that it transpired Roderick and Eckardt had carved each and every one of Beringer's 2,000 treasured stones. They then paid the young diggers in Beringer's employ to pass them off as stones they had dug themselves. Both the defendants were found guilty as charged. The young boys were forgiven their naivety and youthful impetuosity for being drawn into such a sordid plan. As for Beringer himself, it is said he was horrified at the realization that he'd been duped so successfully and been made to look a complete fool. He attempted to buy back every copy of his book, ruining himself in the process, and eventually dying in despair. However, a recent publication offers an alternative ending to the story. It suggests that Beringer himself was responsible for the fraud, that he knowingly faked the stones in a bid for glory and allowed his colleagues to take the blame when the hoax was revealed. Sadly, we'll never know for sure.